We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. A little bit of a different show today here on a Tuesday afternoon. A lot of college basketball on Tuesday night, so we will be back Wednesday for the full basketball recap. But today feels like a good day to kind of set the stage for everything coming in college football. And boy, oh boy, is it going to be a busy but fun few days. We'll open. College football playoff resumes on Thursday. Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, Ohio State. I will give my official preview, my official picks as well. From there, Kirk Herbstreit did a very interesting interview. He and ESPN have been under fire the entire college football postseason. Does ESPN hate college football? Do they love the SEC? Do they have SEC bias? Kirk Herbstreit adamantly says there is zero SEC bias at ESPN. Not sure if I believe him. We'll also talk about an interesting development. Carson Beck banged up. Should he consider returning to school? And how about this? Did you see this? Shedeur Sanders. Now we went from he was the definitive number one pick a week ago to now some people are saying he has a second round grade. So a lot of college football, a lot of NFL draft. We will get back to basketball tomorrow, but we got a lot of football to dive into. Before we get started, couple things. One, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. On YouTube, we are closing in on 50,000 subscribers. So we appreciate your support. You can also download the show on Apple, Spotify. You want to do your boy Torres a favor, leave a 5-star rating and review as well. But new clips, new episodes going up on YouTube, and of course, Apple and Spotify for your podcast needs. Also, before we get started, as I always do, I want to thank our friends. I want to thank our partners. I want to thank Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so it's the new year. Time for you to get in shape. You had fun over the holidays. You want to eat healthy. You want stuff that is delicious, but also healthy as well. Well, that, my friends, is where Collie Puffs comes in. Okay, so I've told you their story. Family-owned business, not far from where I live. Joey, the owner, is a football fan, and he's no different than you and I. Was sitting on the couch watching his team, was sitting on the couch. Kids are in the room. He's looking for something healthy for him to eat, for his kids to eat, but also something delicious, and that is how he created Collie Puffs. This is the new age healthy alternative to the crap food in your grocery aisles, but the best part is, as I said, it is not only healthy, but most importantly, delicious. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease. But again, it tastes really freaking good. At this point, I've told you what I have to tell you, and here's the good news. You don't have to take my word for it anymore. You can try it out for yourself. Visit ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. Also, you can order them on Amazon as well. I think you probably heard of Amazon. Well, guess what? You're on there shopping for gifts, stuff for yourself, friends, family, whatever. You can throw some Collie Puffs in your cart. Try them out for yourselves. For more information, again, ColliePuffs.com. Also, you can order them on Amazon. Thank you to Collie Puffs. We appreciate your support of the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, it is Tuesday afternoon. We are about 48 hours away from the college football playoff resuming. 2 semifinals on Thursday and Friday. There is no more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, let me go ahead and give you my college football playoff picks officially here on a Tuesday before we then get to the rest of a busy few days in football. Going to give you the 2 games. We'll go in order. And guess what? By Friday night, we know who is going to play for the 2024-25 College Football National Championship. We'll get to the Texas-Ohio State game in a second, but let's start Thursday night. This is kind of an important note. Thursday night in Miami, the Orange Bowl, Penn State versus Notre Dame, 7 versus 6 seed, 7:30 Eastern kickoff. And how about this? Notre Dame is actually now up to a 2.5-point favorite. They opened up as about a point and a half point favorite. They are now a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under in this game is set at 45.5. Listen, first of all, I think the important thing to note here, by the way, should mention we have a separate college football betting YouTube and podcast channel. Producer Matt, you could drop the YouTube link in the show in the live chat right now. If you want deep dives on these games, go ahead, find us on YouTube, College Football Betting. That's where we do the 7, 8, 10, 15-minute previews of some of these games. I'll be quick here, but where I want to start, Notre Dame, Penn State. I think the important thing to note here is that obviously the timing of this game. Notre Dame, we all understand there were awful circumstances in New Orleans. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. The Torres family, our thoughts and prayers are with the city of New Orleans, with the victims and their families. There was a tragedy in New Orleans. I understand why that game was delayed. I'm not trying to whatever. But from a football perspective, it is worth noting. Penn State plays New Year's Eve. They're back on the ground New Year's Day in Pennsylvania. Notre Dame, of course, doesn't play for a full 48 hours later. So there is like a 48-hour difference in these two teams and their recovery and their game prep and their whatever. The good news is for Notre Dame, it feels like outside of the Riley Mills injury that happened before the semifinal, the quarterfinal, there were no big injuries in that Georgia game. In terms of this game itself, listen, I think at this point we kind of know who everybody is that's remaining in this college football playoff, right? Notre Dame, they want to run the ball. They don't even really – I think if you haven't watched a ton of Notre Dame this year, you saw it against Georgia. Even against the league competition, they're not even going to try to throw the ball. 110th this season in pass attempts. So basically Riley Leonard is likely to make more plays with his feet than his arms. You go back to that game against Georgia, and in that game – the blueprint that they had was basically the blueprint that they've had against everybody all season long. Riley Leonard with 24 pass attempts, but 37 rush attempts. So not quite 2-to-1 run to pass, but, relatively close. But at the same time, they want to rely on the run game. They want to chew up clock. They want to rely on their defense. And really, their defense is designed to force you to make mistakes. Georgia had 2 turnovers. Obviously, look, the Marcus Freeman thing at the end of the game was incredible, but the whole game plan was built on waiting for you to make a mistake. They forced the turnover right before the half. They score right after it. They go up 10-3. Certainly, they have the kick return for a touchdown to open the second half. So those 2 plays plus the late offsides play really set the whole tone for the entire game. But to me, it goes without saying, I just think that this is who they are. They want to put you in a position where they get a lead. They force you into obvious passing downs. They make you make mistakes. 31 total turnovers forced, most in college football. 18 interceptions, second most behind only Texas. Penn State side of things, Penn State's interesting, right? Because you look at Penn State, they're 2 games into this playoff. Listen, am I the only one that feels like we're not totally sure, what to make of Penn State? You play SMU, you're at home, you dominate that game. It was close. It wasn't even close, but you didn't really even have to break a sweat. You're up 14-0 before anybody could even blink. And so in that game, I don't know that we learned a ton about Penn State. And then I think even in the second game of the playoff, weird game, right? They play Boise. They are actually outgained by Boise. And I think the thing that was kind of wild, four turnovers for Boise is probably the difference in the game. Penn State, I don't think, played anywhere close to their best football, but they did enough to win, and they did enough to put themselves in position to get into this game. As far as my pick is concerned, listen, I think you can probably venture to guess where I'm coming from based on the stuff that I've said. I actually do like Notre Dame to win this game. I like Notre Dame to cover, and I like Notre Dame to advance to the college football national championship game. Why is that? I just think that Notre Dame is perfectly built to take advantage of Penn State. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be a blowout. I'm not saying it's going to be 63-0. But what did I say? Run game, don't beat yourselves, wait for the other team to make a mistake. And I go back to Drew Aller. Listen, I have been an advocate for should Drew Aller seriously consider going pro? But at the same time, if you actually break down what he has done the last few games, he has the size and physicality and tools of a number 1 overall pick. but he certainly ain't there yet. And I think because Notre Dame or Penn State is winning and because they're putting up so many points, we have a false perception as to who he has been as a player. Last 3 games against Boise, 13 of 25 passing. Did have 3 touchdowns, but 171 yards. 13 of 25. I'm not great at math, but that's right around 50% in that game. Against SMU, 13 of 22, 59%. So we talk about, Riley Leonard, Notre Dame doesn't want to throw the ball. Riley Leonard threw 24 times against Georgia. Drew Aller has thrown for 25 and 22 times in his 2 college football playoff appearances. And then against Oregon, we remember that game being close and back and forth. It was really the run game that got things going for Penn State in that game. They averaged about 9 yards per carry. Aller against Oregon, 20 of 39. Again, right around 50%, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So when you have a quarterback that, let's go back to last year, let's go back to this year. Last year, Drew Aller was a different quarterback in the 3 biggest games of the season. Last season, it was Michigan, Ohio State, and Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl. This year, against Ohio State, really wasn't that good. Against Oregon, really wasn't that good. Well, this is the kind of defense that has given him trouble. And so you have a quarterback that has not been elite versus, or hasn't been great versus elite defenses, and you have a defense that is predicated on turning quarterbacks over. I like Notre Dame to win. I still think it's close. I'll say 20-14 is my official pick. Really excited for this one. I will say the crowd should be crazy. I said this on the college football betting show on Monday, but I was a little worried, what should we expect for a crowd in these semifinal games? Well, I bring it up because I talked to somebody at Penn State that said that they sold out of their ticket allotment basically in an hour. Penn State has a huge alumni base, a lot of fans in Florida, so there should be a great environment in Miami. But Notre Dame 20, Penn State 14 is my official pick. Let's keep it going. Let's keep the conversation going with the second college football semifinal. Friday night in Dallas. By the way, Dallas dealing with all sorts of crazy weather right now. Worth noting, by the way, we got what they call the Santa Ana winds in SoCal where I'm at. So first of all, if I lose the internet at any point during this show, I apologize. We got 90, 100-mile-an-hour winds in parts of California. So crazy weather everywhere. Not to make this about Torres, but at the same time, do want to talk about Texas, Ohio State. The game is in Dallas. We know about the ice and the snow and the weather that has blanketed that region of the country. In terms of the game itself, a couple things. One, first of all, Ohio State is a 5.5-point favorite. Over-under in this game is 53.5. It is in Dallas, so we would think that there would be a pro-Texas crowd, but Ohio State obviously always travels well. That place should be rocking just like Miami will be on Thursday night. Looking at this game, from the Ohio State perspective, listen, there's nothing else to say. I got to take back-to-back L's on Ohio State. After Michigan, I thought Ryan Day was probably gone. Didn't think he was coming back. Didn't think he would have the intestinal fortitude to do what he's doing. Well, Ohio State has not only won back-to-back games, they have absolutely dominated, and I got to give credit where it's due. Biggest difference, it goes without saying, they have highlighted and featured their best players. Crazy game plan. Throw the ball to the generational wide receiver. That sounds like a smart game plan. But what I was thinking about over the last couple of days, mentioned this on the college football betting show, is that how coaches always talk about the run game, opening up the pass. In other words, you run the ball, then you hit them deep and they're not ready for it. I think Ohio State's kind of been the opposite. I think the pass game has opened up the run. Oh, you don't have answers for Jeremiah Smith, but we're going to throw it to him 3, 4, 5 times in the first 2 series. Then when you're playing, however you're trying to defend him, that's when we get it to Travion Henderson, and he rips off a 40-yard run. Happened several times against Oregon, and that's exactly what I think has led to Ohio State's success. They have focused on getting the ball to their best players. Those best players, the pass game has opened up the run game, and Ohio State is steamrolling everybody. Texas, little bit of a different story for the Texas Longhorns, okay? So Texas, listen, I actually give Sark a little bit of credit. We've talked about this a lot over the last month. I don't think he trusts Quinn Ewers at all. And the fact that he doesn't trust Quinn Ewers and the fact that they keep winning, it is a testament to not only how talented the defense is, but a little bit of a testament to Sark and his confidence in that defense and his ability to adjust as a coach, right? A lot of these offensive coaches, they get so caught up in the, I got to show off this and I got to do that. And Sark's like, no, I'm going to rely on my defense. I'm going to rely on my run game, and I'm going to try to get out of here with wins no matter how ugly they are. And so really that's the question for me. Can Texas keep playing the way that they've been playing and actually win this game and certainly win another game after it? I have my doubts, right? Because you look at Texas the last 4 or 5 weeks, and I talked about this, but really, I think you could argue the last 6 games, take out Clemson, which has by far the worst defense that they have played over that stretch. Just think about it. In those games, what is Clemson's game, or what is Texas's game plan been? It has been get early lead, run the crap out of the ball, hope our defense plays lights out, and try to get out with a win no matter how ugly it is. Go back to Arkansas, 20-10 final score. That game was ugly. They relied on the defense, didn't put too much on Quinn Ewers. Kentucky, final score 31-14. You'd sit there and say, oh, they dominated. No. They ran the ball almost 50 times in that game and didn't put a lot on Quinn Ewers' plate. The SEC championship game, it was 6-3 at the half. Same deal. 22-19 in overtime. That tells you how low scoring it was. Texas A&M was the same. Arizona State was the same a few days ago. And so that is who they have been now for about 6 games. And I think once you've been at that team for 6 games, I think we just have to acknowledge that's who you are. And so as far as my pick is concerned, I do like Ohio State to win. I actually think the best bet in this game, though, is the under of 53.5. Bottom line, I think Ohio State is going to score on everybody, but do believe that Texas's defense is so good that this is probably the best matchup. Like if you want to see what Ohio State looks like against the best defense they could face, I think this is probably that defense. Texas has NFL guys everywhere. Anthony Hill is a stud. Colin Simmons is a stud. Jahdae Barron is a stud. I mean, you just go on and on down the list. The transfer from Clemson, the defensive back, is a stud. And so I do think if anyone's going to slow down Ohio State to a degree, I think it's Texas. I don't know if anybody can. But I also wonder, can Texas move the football? Listen, no disrespect to Arizona State or Texas A&M or Kentucky or whoever. This Ohio State defense is a completely different animal. Basically top 5 in every category that matters. Pass defense, run defense. The number of turnovers or the number of pass TDs they've given up all year is microscopic. And so this is going to be, I believe, a mostly defensive game. I think Ohio State's got 2-3 more big plays in them. I could see a scenario. I think Ohio State's going to cover, but I think to me the best bet is the under. I don't even think it's a debate. I'll say final score 24-7, Ohio State wins, but the under is my best bet. Like I said, I could see this game being, 17-10 with 6 minutes to go and you're sweating the 5.5. I don't think you'll be sweating the under at all. Ohio State wins, Notre Dame wins. That's my prediction, and that will be my national championship game. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we come back, speaking of national championship games, Kirk Herbstreit, ESPN have been under fire for basically being accused of are y'all, too in bed with the SEC? Well, Kirk Herbstreit had some interesting comments. He and ESPN are apparently rooting for the Ohio State Notre Dame national championship game that I just gave you. So we're going to come back. We'll discuss that. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Maura Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Deion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. So first of all, I mentioned it off the top, but do hope wherever you are, you're safe, you're healthy. I know there was a lot of snow and ice and sleet in the southeastern part of the country. I know Louisville got record snowfall, I believe, the Nashville area. So I hope everybody's okay. I know it's going down to Texas. I mentioned that out here in California, we have like 100-mile-an-hour winds. So I just want to reiterate, wherever you're watching, however you're listening, hope everybody's safe, hope everybody's okay. Bundle up. It is that time of year. The weather's getting crazy. Also should mention, by the way, we'll get back to college hoops tomorrow because there's going to be a loaded slate to react to. Tennessee going to Florida tonight, Auburn going to Texas, Kentucky going to Georgia. So we will get to a lot of college hoops here on the Wednesday episode of the show. With that said, we're going to stick with college football. And I do want to talk about a topic that has certainly become like a huge talking point in the world of college football over the last probably 3 to 4 weeks. And that is bluntly this. Does ESPN have SEC bias? And the whole conversation really started at the beginning of the playoff. Listen, let me even backtrack, right? Because I know I'm going to get people, Torres, you just hate the SEC. I think you could argue of anybody in the media. I don't think anybody's been more pro SEC than I have. I've been on the SEC basketball thing for years. I love watching college baseball in June. And for 99% of my college football viewing life, the SEC has been the best conference in college football, okay? But at the same time, I do think it has been fair to question how good the league was this year, how deep the league was. I said from the beginning, I thought the committee got it right. They decided they weren't going to punish anybody that lost in the conference championship game, so you have to put in SMU. Indiana, of course, only had one loss at the end of the regular season. No bad wins, unlike Alabama, unlike Ole Miss. So we've done that debate. That's where I stand. I don't believe – listen, I have no problem with people saying that historically the SEC is the best conference in college football the last 15, 20 years. But I think we have to evaluate that every single year. So that's where I stand. ESPN, though, has just – it's seemingly been in bed with the SEC basically since the playoffs started. The second Indiana fell down against Notre Dame in the first game of the college football playoff, it immediately defaulted to, oh my goodness, Indiana shouldn't have been here. This was their strength of schedule. This is who they beat. We should have had Alabama in. And so obviously we've seen Alabama isn't maybe as good as we thought. I think Ole Miss had holes in their resume. But we're not here to relitigate the college football, the 12 teams that got in. But I do think there's a broader conversation about, is there bias from the worldwide leader in sports at ESPN about the SEC? And so I bring it up because earlier on Tuesday, Kirk Herbstreit went on the Andy and Ari show on the On3 podcast network to kind of discuss all of this. Before we get to what he said, I do want to give some context. I do want to play what he said after the opening round of the college football playoff. So Tennessee, Ohio State goes final. This is what Kirk Herbstreit had to say about how the college football playoff come together and some of the teams that got in.
Committee won't get caught up in what the social media and a lot of people who are fringe fans get caught up in, which is wins. They had 11 wins. They must be good. Who did they beat? I think is much more important than how many wins you have. That's old school way of approaching it. Indiana having 11 wins and beating nobody, that doesn't mean they're one of the 12 best teams. Remember, I know, Lyndon, I'm not taking this out on you, but there's a big difference between deserving and best. Yeah. What this is all about is giving us the best 12 teams. Now, it's subjective. How you want to figure out the best 12 is up to you, but
so that was Kirk Herbstreit after the opening round of the college football playoff. If you remember, opening round, 4 blowouts, SMU gets destroyed, Indiana gets destroyed, Tennessee gets destroyed, and Clemson, I wouldn't say they got destroyed, but, 4 teams all take losses. And so Kirk Herbstreit says that, And while I fundamentally agree that we need to be careful how we evaluate teams just based on wins and losses, it did come off as a very pro SEC. Like the insinuation being a 9-3 Alabama is completely different than an 11-1 Indiana. That was the conversation at the time. And unfortunately for Kirk Herbstreit, I guess it's the gift and the curse. When you make a lot of money to be the face of something, you got to be the face of something, right? And so nobody criticizes, the guy in the production truck when it appears as though a network has SEC bias. And so Kirk Herbstreit has kind of become the face of this. Is there SEC bias at ESPN? Well, he addressed that on Tuesday morning on the Andy and Ari show on 3. This is what Kirk Herbstreit said on Tuesday.
Let me straighten the record on one last thing. The ESPN loves the SEC so much that we could not have paid for a better Final Four with Notre Dame and Ohio State and Penn State and Texas. The only one missing is Michigan. If you could somehow wedge Michigan in, so like this idea that we want Alabama and Texas A&M and Auburn, and are you kidding me? Like if you're asking us who we would want, we'll take Ohio State every year, Notre Dame. Like this is a ratings bonanza. So if you're going to accuse us of anything, you should accuse us of wanting Ohio State, wanting Notre Dame, and these big brands. If you knew anything about ratings, that's who you want. You don't want these small little Clemsons and small little Southern schools when it comes to cheering for ratings. Ratings are big, massive Big Ten brands. That's what ratings are.
And Notre Dame, who either people love or hate.
Yeah. If you get Ohio State, Notre Dame in the national championship, you think we're going to be like, doggone it, if we could have only gotten a couple good brands in the championship.
First of all, how about producer Matt's Auburn Tigers just taking strays? How about the Texas A&M Aggies taking strays? But there's Kirk Herbstreit defending ESPN, saying if we had it our way, it'd be Ohio State, it'd be Notre Dame. Can we get Michigan into this playoff? As a matter of fact, somebody in the chat has already commented. He said, Kirk, welcome home, man. Go Chase, go Blue. Herbie is a Michigan man now, and so is Chase. All Big Ten all the time. All right. So it was an interesting conversation about a topic that everybody has wanted to talk about over the last couple of weeks. So let's go ahead and dive into this because I think transparently, I think two things can be true. I do think that even ESPN would acknowledge that the brands that they got in the college football semifinal will be good for ratings and good for interest, which is what Kirk Herbstreit was alluding to. I also don't think we can deny that there is major SEC bias at ESPN. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right. So from the Kirk Herbstreit comments of, we couldn't have dreamed it up any better. We couldn't have paid for a better semifinal round than Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas. We just wish we could get Michigan in. Listen, what I can tell you a little behind the scenes baseball. What do they call it? Inside baseball. I've worked in TV. I work for Fox Sports. So, we have nothing to do with the playoff. I always mentioned Fox Sports Radio is actually owned by iHeart. So I'm actually get my checks from iHeart, et cetera. So this isn't like a pro, anti-ESPN, pro Fox thing. Like, listen, the bottom line is that if you follow college football, if you have any understanding of whatever, you understand that what he said is factually correct. Is that if ESPN or Fox or NBC or CBS or Turner or whoever's broadcasting the national championship, like if they could just pull out of a hat, these are the two teams that we want in the national championship game, I think they would pick Notre Dame and Ohio State, which is obviously the pick that I have made earlier in the show. And so it's no different than when you hear, the NBA would love a Knicks-Lakers finals, or if the NFL was up to them, they would have the Cowboys in the Super Bowl every year. What Kirk said is factually accurate, is that I think ESPN understands the brand power of Ohio State, the brand power of Notre Dame, the brand power of Penn State, which for people who do not know has the largest alumni base of any school in America, and the brand power of Texas. They're in, but we would gladly take Michigan because of the brand power. So I think everybody kind of understands what he's saying. But I think what's also true is this. The idea that ESPN has no SEC bias, it's just nonsense, okay? First of all, let me say this. It's a simple To quote my old buddy, JJ Redick, right? It's a simple math equation, F-head. It's a simple math equation. ESPN is paying hundreds of millions of dollars a year to be the exclusive home of all things SEC sports. And so, one, they are not only financially incentivized for the SEC to be good, but they're financially incentivized for them to promote them, right? It's simple common sense. ESPN can say, oh, we have no bias, no whatever. Yes, you do. It's no different than, if Coors Light is the official beer of the Aaron Torres pod, I might like Modelo or Bud Light or whatever, Pacifico more, but I'm always going to shout out Coors Light and whatever. It's common sense. So, of course, ESPN is not financially invested in the SEC being good, but they're going to promote the league whenever they can, and that is exactly what happened. Beyond that, I think this is the important part. There's going to be some natural bias because those are the teams that you're following the most closely. Those are the teams that you're covering the most closely. And I think, as importantly, those are the teams that you just have proximity to, okay? And I was thinking about this, is that no matter what it is in life, it could be anything. What you kind of have proximity to is what you have a natural bias to, right? If you grow up in New York, you think New York has the greatest pizza in the world, even if it doesn't. If you grow up in Chicago, you say deep dish is better than New York style. Listen, I'm wearing my UConn basketball gear. I grew up in Connecticut during the Jim Calhoun era. So, of course, I'm going to have a predisposed bias that I think college basketball is better than NBA basketball, even though, wink, wink, it really is. But it's the same with ESPN. It's the same with Kirk Herbstreit. I don't blame Kirk Herbstreit, but think about the games that he called this year. You know how many games of Ohio State Kirk Herbstreit called prior to the college football playoff? 0. Never saw Ohio State in person. Never saw Penn State in person. Covered one Notre Dame game before the playoff. That was Texas A&M in week 1 in August, okay? And so I'm just bringing this up to very simply say, of course he has bias because he's in those stadiums every weekend with those fans, with those coaches. And in my opinion, there's just no doubt that when you're exposed to it every single week, how could you think that something else is better? When you're at South Carolina and there's 80,000 fans and they're going crazy and South Carolina looks like the greatest team you've ever seen, of course you're going to sit there and say, well, Indiana, I just watched them on TV against Michigan State. They're fine, but let me tell you about South Carolina. Or SMU, cool story, but let me tell you about Alabama. Like, it's natural bias. And it's just, of course there's bias. And I find it nonsense and silly and nonsensical that ESPN has none. Does it make any sense to me at all that we can't just acknowledge, like, yes, of course there's some. Some of it is financially motivated, but some of it is just you're around it more. So you start to believe it more. And I think that's the issue that I think a lot of fans have. You're the worldwide leader. You're supposed to be the face and the voice of college football. You're actively promoting the brands that you're aligned with, which is okay, but you can't not acknowledge that there's other great brands out there, the Big 10, the Big 12, on and on. And I know what people are going to say, well, what about Fox? What about this? What about that? What about NBC? What about CBS? They have an affiliation with the Big 10. Yeah, but I haven't seen anybody from Fox. I haven't seen anybody from from NBC or CBS going out there saying the Big 10 is definitively the best conference and they got shafted. They should have had more teams in the college football playoff. Haven't seen anybody from NBC doing it. Haven't seen anybody from CBS doing it. Haven't seen anybody from Fox doing it. All anybody's asking is cover the sport objectively. All anybody's asking is to just acknowledge, hey, the league was a little bit down this year. And then, oh, by the way, on top of that, it's also worth noting that other leagues were good and that we're now all seeing it in the college football playoff. So Kirk Herbstreit, I feel bad. I think he's taking too many strays. I think he's become the face of this thing. And I kind of sort of agree with the concept of like, hey, we have to be smarter about how we evaluate teams. But do I believe that ESPN is biased towards the SEC? Of course I do. But shout out to Kirk Herbstreit, who, as the commenter said, yeah, he's a Michigan man. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take one more break. When we come back, just some other news and notes. Carson Beck, I saw something on Tuesday. Like, should Carson Beck be thinking about coming back to college? I think he should be. We'll get to a couple other things outside of that. We'll take a quick break and be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show. You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. A lot of great comments in the comment section. Maybe we'll get to them a little bit later. Do want to do a little bit more college football before we get out of here. A little bit of NFL draft. As I've mentioned throughout the show, Wednesday afternoon, we will do a full show recapping the college hoops from Tuesday. Tennessee traveling to Florida, Auburn at Texas, Kentucky at Georgia. So there's a lot of intriguing games on Tuesday. We'll do the full recap on Wednesday morning. With that said, do want to stick with college football. And I'll say this. One thing I always say about the Aaron Torres pod, by the way, if you're watching on Twitter X, come over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, do me a favor, get over there. We're closing in on 50,000 subscribers. We need everybody over on YouTube. Turn on those notifications if you're watching. We appreciate your support. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap with a couple college football things. The first one is this, and it's funny, right? So I've said this before, but what I believe this show is about, fundamentally, we talk about 4 different things as it relates to sports. We talk about what did happen. We talked about what will happen. We talk about what could happen. And we talk about what should happen. First 3 are pretty obvious, right? What did happen? Notre Dame beat Georgia. What will happen? The Tennessee Titans are going to fire, the Cleveland, who fired a coach? I can't even think. The New England Patriots are going to fire a coach. And then you go from there. What could happen? Okay, what did happen? The Patriots fired Gerard Mayo. What could happen is they're going to hire Mike Vrabel. That's a good example of the first 3. What should happen is where, to me, the show gets the most fun, because we don't always talk about things that are definitively going to happen, but we do have conversations that are probably at least worth discussing, even if it might not happen, right? So you think about, again, let's just go to the NFL. What's the conversation at this time of the year? Should your favorite team trade, fire their coach? Should your favorite team draft a quarterback? Should Mike Tomlin look for another job outside the Pittsburgh Steelers? I mean, those are just examples. But I want to talk about a college football should that I don't think will happen, but I think it's worth at least having a conversation. And that is the future of Carson Beck. So Carson Beck is the quarterback at the University of Georgia, was the quarterback at the University of Georgia, started each of the last 2 years, was projected as a first-round pick coming into this year. And listen, I don't think there's any doubt that he regressed over the course of the season. So even before he got hurt in the SEC championship game, people were talking about, he went from potentially the number 1 overall pick to maybe a 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounder. Then you add the elbow injury on top of it. And so Kirk Herbstreit, I'm still stuck on Herbstreit. Carson Beck, season is over. Career at Georgia is over. He was at that Sugar Bowl. By the way, did anybody else notice that he didn't look very happy on the sidelines when Gunnar Stockton threw that touchdown pass? Another conversation for another day. But I saw this on a Miami message board, okay? Miami is clearly looking for quarterbacks, and we'll get into all that conversation in a minute. But they basically brought up the point. Should we try to go after Carson Beck? Should we try to convince him to not go pro, but return to college football and play at Miami? Now, it was just a fan. I don't know if it was a fan or a journalist. It wasn't like a source thing like, oh, Miami has reached out to Carson Beck. It was just, should we make the phone call and see if he's willing to come back? I thought it was very interesting, and I think it's absolutely worth discussing. And I've even got a hot take for you. What should happen versus what could happen versus what will happen. I don't know what will happen. But if I was advising Carson Beck, I would say take every phone call that you possibly can. And I think most importantly, if you can get that bag to come back to college basketball, I think it's a college football, I think it's a no-brainer and that you absolutely should. And so with Carson Beck, I think it's interesting. Declared for the draft, not coming back, but he is recovering from an injury. And I think that's the first part with Carson Beck specifically, is you go to the NFL, you end up as a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, you might never even get an opportunity. You're going to go there, not be ready to play, whatever. But even under the assumption that you're going to be healthy enough for next season, which all the reports are, there's no doubt that the injury coming off of the bad season is going to impact your draft stock. It just is. There's just zero doubt about it. And so in my opinion, it's almost a no-brainer because I would assume if he comes back to college, Georgia is not an option. I think they're no different than Texas with Quinn Ewers. I think at Texas, they are ready to move on to Arch Manning. So if Quinn Ewers comes back, and we did do a clip for this on the YouTube channel, that if Quinn Ewers comes back, he's going to have to find another college. And I think Quinn Ewers should do it too. And I think it's probably the same with Carson Beck, is the idea being that they're going to move on to Gunnar Stockton or whoever. That doesn't necessarily have to be Gunnar Stockton, but they're kind of past the Carson Beck era. So in my opinion, I think there's no doubt he should at least look into coming back. But the reason that he should come back is pretty straightforward. And that reason is, again, very clear. It, my friends, is all about the Benjamins. To me, it's just in this era of college football, I don't understand why any quarterback who is not a first-round pick isn't using every year of eligibility that he possibly can, okay? Because at the end of the day, we did this a few days ago. We did a clip on Quinn Ewers. And I did the breakdown of Quinn Ewers if he comes back to college versus if he's a second, third-round pick. And you just go to the NFL right now. Will Levis, who's certainly a topic of conversation as the Titans appear set to draft a quarterback at number 1 overall, Will Levis was the first pick of the second round. Will Levis signed about a 4-year, $10 or so million deal. That's very good money. 1, it's not life-changing money. And 2, beyond that, it's also worth noting, there's probably more money to be made as a college quarterback than what Will Levis made as a professional quarterback this year. And so if you're Carson Beck, I'm sorry, but even off an elbow injury, there is going to be some team somewhere that is desperate for a quarterback that's going to pay you $2, $3, $4 million per year. And so I think you got to take those calls. And I think beyond that, the upside versus downside is pretty clear. If Carson Beck comes back to college, what is the upside versus the downside? The downside is you stink and your draft stock plummets further. Well, guess what? You're going to be a second or third rounder anyway, so who cares? And on top of it, you're getting paid. It's not like you're coming back and not getting paid. Come back to college, guess what? You're going to get paid. And the upside is you have a Cam Ward type situation where you drastically improve your draft stock and you have the opportunity to make way more money in the bigger picture. I'm not saying that would happen, but it could happen. So to me, it makes sense. And again, in this NIL world, I don't know why everybody wouldn't consider it. I think what's especially interesting, the schools that could potentially still be interested. Listen, a lot of these schools got quarterbacks, but they all don't. And it's funny that this came from a message board because I'll be real. I still look at Miami, and I think they got something up their sleeve, okay? You can criticize Mario Cristobal for whatever, and he's certainly heard all the criticisms. But the truth of the matter with Mario Cristobal, no matter what you think of him, first off, you know Miami's only had 2 10-win seasons in the last 20 years. This was one of them. So, it's funny how we went from Miami as a poverty program to, oh, my God, they only won 10 games. What a disaster. Now, it was disappointing. 2 games that they could have won in November, they lost. Doesn't change the fact that the program is on an upward trajectory. And then the other thing is I look at Mario Cristobal. I just think he's too good of a recruiter to go into next year with the quarterback situation that it currently is. And so Quinn Ewers is the name that's been bandied about. Where could he end up if he comes back to college? I think Carson Beck should do the same, and I think Miami should make the phone call. And with Miami, I just refuse to believe that they are going into next season with the quarterback situation that they currently have. And so is it Quinn Ewers? Is it Carson Beck? Is it somebody that we're not even talking about? I just don't believe that they're gonna roll the dice with Emory Williams. And then here's the other thing, and I said this with the Quinn Ewers piece, is remember, they didn't get a commitment from Cam Ward. I believe the date was January 13th of last year. In other words, Cam Ward had declared for the draft. He was ready to move on. And the Miami Hurricanes convinced him to remove his name from the draft and return to college football. So just because Carson Beck has made the comment that he is ready to move on, I don't know that I believe him. And even if he intends to, I think he should at least take the phone call from schools. By the way, none other ones immediately come to mind as places that would be landing spots. I think most everybody has said at this point, except for Notre Dame. Notre Dame, the reports are that if Quinn Ewers comes back, they may be a favorite. Maybe Oregon could be in the mix. I just think if you're Carson Beck's agent, you got to take those phone calls, and we'll see what happens. By the way, one last thing on Carson Beck, too. I've been the biggest critic of Carson Beck out there. I do think it is worth noting one other thing. If you watch the Sugar Bowl, pretty clear it wasn't all Carson Beck's fault on that offense. The Georgia wide receivers dropped more passes than anybody in college football. Georgia never got a run game going all season long. And so I was critical of Carson Beck. I didn't think he was very good. He did turn the ball over too much. But maybe in hindsight, it wasn't all Carson Beck, and maybe more blame should be going other places than just him. I could go on and on, but again, I ultimately think that to me, the conversation becomes he should at least consider coming back, whether he will or not. All right. One final topic before we get out of here. Let's go ahead and switch gears. Another high-profile quarterback and another narrative that is running wild, okay? So if you listen to Sunday's show, you know that we talked a little bit about Shedeur Sanders and the NFL draft, okay? And on Sunday, what we really talked about was, hey, the NFL draft order is out. The Tennessee Titans officially have the number one pick, but where it gets interesting is what is Coach Prime and what are Shedeur going to do now that the Tennessee Titans are officially on the clock? Because if you remember, last March of 2024, Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, did an interview with $1 million worth of gain. We talked about it on Sunday, where he said, look, I'm not afraid to quote, and this was a direct quote, pull an Eli. In other words, if I don't believe that it is the right landing spot for Shedeur or Travis Hunter, I am not afraid to get in the way and say, you're not going there. Don't draft my son. Don't draft my adopted son in Travis Hunter. And by the way, that's a metaphorical adopted. I don't think there's any paperwork, but you get the point. So I bring it up because that was the conversation on Sunday. Let's bring it full circle to Tuesday, because we went from 2 weeks ago, Shedeur is the definitive number one pick, and maybe he's not going to want to go with whoever gets the number one pick, to a very polar opposite take just 48 hours later. That is because late last week, the clip didn't really surface until this week, but late last week, apparently Tom Pelissero, NFL insider, went on Rich Eisen's show and gave a pretty spicy meatball of a take. That take, we don't even know if Shedeur Sanders is going in the first round. I'll read the quotes directly. We don't have the video. Here's what Tom Pelissero said. He said, I've already talked to people within the league who don't have anything close to a first-round grade on the guy. The idea that he's just going to walk in and going to be the number one pick, that's probably pushing it. If I were guessing who comes off the board first, I'd say Shedeur is not the first Colorado player off the board as it stands today. Ooh, buddy, there is a lot to dive into. Let's go ahead and do it right now. First of all, a couple things. One, I love the narrative of, oh, he's the definitive number one pick 2 weeks ago, to now, oh, he might not go first overall, or he might not even be in the first round. So that's one. Two, I think there's a couple things here. First of all, listen, I'm not questioning Tom Pelissero. I'm sure he's a great reporter, whatever. But I think it's worth noting because I'm in part of these conversations all the time. Just because you've heard from one team, one thing, one whatever, one executive, one GM, one coach, one offensive coordinator, whatever, it doesn't mean that it's common consensus, right? Listen, I talk to coaches all the time. Oh, that kid's not good. That kid, I wouldn't take that kid. He doesn't fit our system. He wouldn't be good, blah, 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 this and that. And then, you talk to another coach and it's like, oh, he's awesome. We would take him in a heartbeat. I wish we had the money to get him. In college, it's the NIL. I wish we had NIL to get that kid. He's just not in our wheelhouse, And so just because this guy heard from one NFL GM or one executive or one scout doesn't mean that that's the consensus. I would take it a step further and say I'm almost positive that that's not the consensus. But I'd also take it a step further. Even if there's question marks, let's also call a spade, okay? The quarterback is the most important position in all of football. And so this notion that Shedeur Sanders, no matter what his grade is, could ever fall to the second round. Listen, I don't even know what the bet is, and maybe somebody can throw something in the chat. I'll donate something to somebody if Shedeur Sanders falls to the second round without any injuries, which aren't going to happen, or character things come out, which certainly aren't going to happen because he seems like a great kid, okay? He's not falling to the second round because the bottom line is there are way too many teams that need a quarterback. So independent of what you think of Shedeur, let's just use our brains, okay? What's the old line from the movie? Remember the movie A League of Their Own? Let's use your head. That's that lump 3 feet above your ass. Okay, sorry for the vulgarity. If you're driving around with kids, I apologize. By the way, I think the A word is okay to say on podcast and YouTube and also radio. I don't think the FCC has a problem with it. But use your head. That's that lump 3 feet above your you-know-what, okay? So the bottom line is, even if you don't like Shedeur, let's just look at the NFL draft order. Number 1 overall, Tennessee Titans. Guess what they need? A freaking quarterback. Number 2 overall, Cleveland Browns. Probably need a quarterback as well. Deshaun Watson, we'll see. Number 3 overall, the New York Football Giants. Yeah, they need a quarterback. Number 6 overall, the Las Vegas Raiders need a quarterback. There's another team in the top 10. Let me see really quick that I said might need a quarterback. Number 7, the New York Jets might need a quarterback. We don't know. Is Aaron Rodgers coming back? Is he not? The New Orleans Saints at number 9. New head coach, not a new front office with Mickey Loomis, but do they believe Spencer Rattler is the future? Do they believe Jake Hayner is the future? Because if not, they may need to get a quarterback. So this idea that Shedeur is going to fall to the second round is ridiculous. And what I would also say is I just find it ridiculous that we are already 2 days after the draft order came out, completely picking apart his game. And I do think, and I talk about this all the time, we as a society are such prisoners of the last thing that we have seen rather than the totality of what we have seen over the course of a week or a month or a year or a season or whatever. Let me give you an example. Georgia Notre Dame, college football semifinal. I picked Notre Dame to win. Now, I get a lot of stuff wrong, but why did I pick Notre Dame? I said we're too focused on the last thing we saw from Georgia, which was the SEC championship game. What I said was Georgia has been inconsistent all year. Some games they're really good. Some games they're really bad. Should have lost to Kentucky. Could have lost here. Could have lost to Georgia Tech at home on senior day. So stop getting caught up in the last thing you saw, then beat Texas in the college football playoff. And also, let's make sure to remember that this was a team that was inconsistent all year. And so I think so many people are caught up with Shedeur's most recent performance against BYU, which was not good, that they're freaking out. But the counter to that is, first of all, I don't think it was terrible. I think he was just running for his life because the Colorado O-line was obviously completely overmatched by the BYU front seven. By the way, hot take. I think you could argue BYU got more screwed missing the playoff than anybody from the SEC or Miami. BYU had a win over SMU, 10-2, whatever, another conversation. BYU was awesome, okay? And so Shedeur Sanders, I'm not going to blame him that against the best defensive front he saw all year, he was getting chased around. He didn't have a great game. But you can see the stats on the screen. This was the season. 4,100 yards passing, 41 total touchdowns, second most in the FBS, 74% completion percentage for Shedeur Sanders. That's not my opinion. Those are just facts. You know what also is a fact? NFL offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur. So there's none of this, he played in this system and how is it going to adjust? He played in a pro-style system for the last 2 years. Beyond that, I think this is important. A lot of career starts. Look at the guys that are having success early this year. Bo Nix, million career starts in college football. Jaden Daniels, million career starts in college football. Michael Penix, I know it's hard to say how good he was because he barely played, but 1 million starts. Caleb Williams statistically was good even if he struggled. A lot of starts in college. That matters. Who are the guys that are bust? Trey Lance started one season in one game his last year. Zach Wilson, one good season, played against basically a group of 5 schedule that final year. So I could go on and on. But Shedeur did it at a high level for an offensive coordinator, a lot of different, a lot of career starts. And I just don't understand this notion that he's a second-round pick because, again, take my bias out of it, take what Torres thinks out of it. Too many teams need a quarterback. And I also don't believe that he's bad. Big arm, accurate downfield, 4,100 passing yards. He had more passing yards than half the NFL quarterbacks. He had more passing yards than Caleb Williams in 13 games instead of Caleb Williams 17 games. Now, I'm not blaming Caleb Williams. I'm just stating that as a fact. Second most in FBS. No run game. Bad offensive line. This kid's going top 10. I think he's going top 3. I think somebody might trade up. I don't know who it is. But this notion that he's going in the second round, I don't know what else there is to say. All right, let's see if there's any other interesting questions. I think we got a little quieter of a chat today. I do see Amber saying Tom was so wrong for that. I do agree with you, Amber. Listen, I mean, you're not wrong. It's, it's what he's hearing from one person. And I think it's so easy for all of us in the media, and listen, this is why on my Twitter page, I just don't put out a ton of a source tells me this, that, the other thing. It's because of the fact that one person is not a consensus, okay? One person says, UConn's the best team in college basketball. It's like, well, I talked to 20 other people that say that that's not the case at all. One person says Mark Pope isn't going to work as a hire at Kentucky. Well, guess what? I talked to 10 people that said he's going to be awesome at Kentucky. And it's the same with Shedeur Sanders. Okay, it's cool that one executive told you that he could have a second-round grade on him. Doesn't mean it's everybody. By the way, should mention, as always, for our Colorado coverage, make sure to follow our Torres on CU page on Twitter. Torres on CU for all of our Colorado coverage. All right, I'll tell you what. We've done an hour here on a Tuesday. I think it's time for us to go ahead and get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. If you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music as well. But YouTube, we are closing in on 50,000 subscribers. We cannot do that without your support. Also, by the way, should mention, unrelated, we'll be back to talk college hoops on Wednesday's show. So thank you all for tuning in. Plenty of college hoops on Wednesday. Probably maybe a Thursday afternoon show. We'll see. Whatever. And then we'll have something with the college football playoff as well. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, etc. I think that's all for today's show. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick. My boy got punked by Charles Barkley the other day. Time for JJ Redick to unblock me. I think he's going to be back in the media soon. I'll be back. New episode Wednesday. We'll be same time, same place. Wednesday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific, right here on YouTube. Aaron Torres.